Why do kind people often feel exhausted? Why, as we get older, do we find ourselves increasingly dragged along by the expectations of others, by requests that are difficult to refuse, by seemingly small desires that accumulate into a burden? Many people live their entire lives feeling their energy dwindling without understanding why. The ancients saw this very deeply and said something very blunt. Those who don't know how to say no are depleting themselves, not because they are bad. On the contrary, it's often because they are too good, too afraid of upsetting others, too afraid of being judged as selfish, too accustomed to putting the needs of others before their own. When we're young, we think that pleasing others is the way to be loved. We think that doing a little more will maintain relationships. But the further we go, the more we realize a painful truth. Not everyone appreciates our sacrifices, and not every sacrifice brings peace. The ancients said that a wise person is not someone who can do many things. A wise person is someone who knows when to say no and can control themselves. Refusal is not turning your back. Refusal is setting boundaries. It's clearly stating where you can go and where you can stop. It's not letting kindness be exploited. There are people who are always there when others need them, but no one is there when they themselves are exhausted. There are people who nod in agreement to every request, but at night they are tired, resentful, and empty. That exhaustion doesn't come from a heavy workload, but from living in the wrong place for themselves. People who don't know how to say no often harbor many fears. Fear of losing relationships, fear of being misunderstood, fear of disappointing others. But the ancients taught that if a relationship only exists when you always have to nod in agreement, then that relationship is inherently unbalanced. Knowing when to say no is a very high form of wisdom. It requires the awareness to recognize your limits. It requires the courage to accept that not everyone will be pleased. And it requires enough self-respect not to sell off your energy, time, and peace of mind. In this video, we will contemplate 15 ancient teachings on how to say no correctly, maintain self-control, and live more lightly amidst the many constraints of life. Not to become cold-hearted, but to be kind and wise, compassionate with boundaries, and to live without exhaustion. If you're tired of constantly trying to please others, listen to this video slowly. You might not change your life immediately, but simply changing the way you say no can start a different path. Subscribe to the channel to join us in cultivating a more mindful, resilient, and peaceful way of life each day. 1. Many people grow up with the unspoken belief that refusal is heartless, that saying no is selfish, that if they don't help, don't indulge, don't nod in agreement, they will upset others. This belief leads them to habitually endure prolonged forbearance. And the more forbearance they endure, the further they drift away from themselves. The ancients looked directly at this and said something very clear. Refusal is not unintentional. Refusal is self-respect. When a person doesn't know how to refuse, the first thing they lose is not the relationship, but the respect they have for themselves. Because every time they nod in agreement against their will, they are silently hurting themselves. Not refusing doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. Often, it's just fear. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of being criticized. Fear of losing someone's place in their heart. But the ancients taught that a relationship is only strong when both parties are respected. If your presence is only valued when you sacrifice, then that's not respect. The story of a student who always helped others but lost his own path. Once upon a time, there was a very kind student. He always helped anyone who asked. When friends asked him for help with their studies, he explained everything thoroughly. When acquaintances asked him to do odd jobs, he never refused. When his teacher gave him extra work, he accepted it all. He believed that hard work and kindness would eventually be recognized. At first, everyone liked him, but gradually, that help became taken for granted. No one asked if he was tired. No one cared if he still had time for his studies. Every time he thought about refusing, a feeling of guilt would well up inside him, so he would nod in agreement. As time passed, his friends gradually progressed. Some achieved success, some found their own paths. Meanwhile, he struggled. His academic performance declined. His initial dreams faded. It wasn't because he was incompetent, but because he had devoted too much energy to others' paths. One day, when he truly needed help, he realized a sad truth. Everyone he had helped was busy. No one had time for him. It was then that he understood that boundless kindness is taken for granted. And when that sense of entitlement is gone, people no longer feel the need to hold on to it. Ancient people used stories like these to remind people of a profound truth. Helping others while losing oneself is not kindness, but a lack of wisdom. Kindness needs to be guided by discernment. Otherwise, it will turn around and hurt the very person who gives it to them. Knowing when to refuse is a way to maintain kindness. Because when you know how to say no, each time you say yes, it becomes more valuable. Others learn to respect your boundaries, and you no longer feel resentment in silence. The ancients said that only those who know how to protect themselves will be dared to protect by others. Those who always give without keeping anything for themselves will sooner or later run out. When they run out, even if they want to give, they will no longer have the strength. Refusal doesn't make you worse. It only helps you avoid pushing yourself to the brink of exhaustion. There's one very important thing. Refusal doesn't have to be harsh. It doesn't have to be cold. It just needs to be clear. Clear about your capabilities. Clear about your limitations. Clear about what you can and cannot do. When you're clear, those who understand you will respect you. Those who don't understand, no matter how much you try to please them, won't truly value you. A self-respecting person knows the difference between helping and sacrificing. Helping is when you have enough. Sacrifice is when you lack something, but still try your best. The ancients didn't advise people to live selfishly. They only advised people not to live selflessly. If you consistently feel exhausted after helping others, pause for a moment and ask yourself, am I helping out of a desire to help or out of fear of rejection? Am I giving out of abundance or out of exhaustion? The answer will reveal whether it's time to re-establish boundaries. Refusal doesn't diminish your compassion. It simply gives it a place to rest. And when compassion is at rest, it can accompany you for a long time on the path of living a virtuous life without sacrificing yourself. 2. Many people are exhausted not because their work is too demanding, but because they take on too much. That isn't their responsibility. They're used to helping, burdening others, and cleaning up after them. Initially, it's out of kindness. And it becomes a habit. And finally, it leads to silent exhaustion that goes unnoticed. The ancients clearly understood this, which is why they taught that wise people do not shirk their own responsibilities, but neither do they take on the responsibilities of others. Because when we shoulder the burdens of others, we not only expend our energy, but also inadvertently carry their karma. Karma here isn't just about right or wrong. Karma is about consequences. When someone should have learned to take responsibility, but someone else stepped in to do it for them, shielding them, then that lesson is no longer their responsibility. The consequences shift to the person who intervened. The person who made the mistake doesn't mature, while the person who bore the burden becomes increasingly weary and resentful, and their good fortune is gradually eroded. Many troubles in life stem from us overstepping our boundaries. We think helping is good, but not all help is right. There are things that, if we don't do them for others, they will be forced to grow. But if we always do things for them, we will become the scapegoat for all the problems later on. The ancients once said that everyone has their own destiny. When one exceeds that destiny, turmoil will arise. This turmoil doesn't necessarily manifest outwardly, but silently accumulates within. Initially, it's weariness. Then comes frustration. Then resentment. Finally, it's the feeling that one lives a good life, but is not treated fairly. Once upon a time, there was a famous official known for his integrity. He wasn't cold or heartless. However, he had a principle. He only did his assigned work. He wouldn't take on tasks beyond his purview, nor would he cover up the mistakes of others, even if it might earn him the favor of many. Once, a subordinate committed a serious offense and came to him begging for help. A few words from him could have saved the man. Everyone thought he would help, as he had considerable prestige, and it wouldn't harm him immediately. But he refused. He calmly stated that whoever commits a crime must bear the consequences. If he covered for this person today, they would commit an even greater offense tomorrow. Then neither would be at peace. Many considered him too rigid. His subordinates resented him, but he remained steadfast. A few years later, a major upheaval occurred in the court. Those who had previously handled matters for their subordinates, who had taken on tasks outside their assigned duties, were successively implicated. Some lost their positions. Others were punished for wrongdoings they did not commit, but which they had previously covered up. But that official was different. His responsibilities were clear. His records were meticulously kept. No one could drag him into trouble. Later, he was entrusted with greater responsibilities, lived a peaceful old age, had a stable family life, and many descendants. Only then did people understand that he wasn't heartless. He simply possessed wisdom. He didn't save people by bearing their karma for them, but by letting each person bear their own burden. Happiness doesn't come from doing a lot for others. Happiness comes from doing what is right. When we do our duty right, our minds are not troubled. When our minds are not troubled, we sleep peacefully. When we sleep peacefully, our bodies are healthy. When our bodies are healthy, our minds are clear. When our minds are clear, we make fewer wrong decisions. Fewer mistakes mean less negative karma. Less negative karma naturally leads to more happiness. Conversely, those who constantly take on other people's work often live in a state of prolonged stress. Outwardly, they appear gentle, but inwardly, they are exhausted. They fear offending others, fear being judged, fear that if they don't do it, everything will go wrong. But it is this very fear that drains them away day by day without them realizing it. There are people who live very virtuous lives, but often complain about why they always encounter trouble. Very often, the answer doesn't lie with others, but with them getting too involved in matters that aren't their concern. They've taken on too many burdens that aren't their responsibility. Wise people clearly distinguish between what is their responsibility, what can be helped within limits, and what must be resolutely refused. Refusing to do something that is not their duty is not heartless. It is not breaking the law of cause and effect. Whoever sows will reap. If we take on the burden for them, sooner or later, the consequences will come back to haunt us. Refusal doesn't need to be harsh, nor does it need lengthy explanations. Just be clear and calm. When your attitude is firm, others will find it harder to pressure you. Initially, you might be perceived as unenthusiastic, but in the long run, others will respect you because they know you have boundaries. The ancients did not teach people to live coldly. They taught people to live in their proper place. Living in the right place prevents resentment. Living in the right place prevents negative karma. Living in the right place prevents blessings from diminishing. If you're feeling overwhelmed by taking on too many responsibilities that aren't yours, slow down and ask yourself what your role is. Not everything you can do should be done, and not everything others refuse should be your responsibility. Knowing when to say no doesn't make you unkind. On the contrary, it's a profound form of wisdom and a quiet but persistent way to maintain your own well-being. 3. In life, kindness, if not accompanied by wisdom, can easily become a burden. Some people are weary not because they live wickedly, but because they live too easily. They help everyone who asks, sympathize with everyone who complains, and are soft-hearted towards everyone who cries. Only when they are betrayed or exploited do they realize with astonishment why, despite living a good life, they end up suffering. The ancients warned that not everyone who asks for help is worthy of assistance. Helping the right person brings blessings, while helping the wrong person invites misfortune. Misplaced kindness not only fails to save anyone, but also ends up harming oneself. Those who haven't experienced it often believe that helping others is the absolute right thing to do. But those who have faced similar situations understand that some people don't need help. They need to confront the consequences of their own actions. If you shield them, you're not saving them, but rather perpetuating bad habits and sowing seeds of danger for yourself. The ancients did not advise people to live coldly. They advised people to live wisely, because kindness without wisdom is like opening the door to your house for just anyone to walk in. When people are kind, blessings come. When people are wicked, misfortune arrives. And the first to suffer the consequences is always the homeowner. There's an old story, but its value never fades. It tells of a kind and gentle farmer who spent his days working in the fields, never competing with anyone. One day, on his way home, he saw a severely wounded wolf lying dying by the roadside. Seeing this, he felt pity. Even though he knew it was a ferocious animal, he still believed that saving a life was the right thing to do. He brought the wolf home, bandaged its wounds, and gave it food and water. Initially, the wolf was very weak, lying still in a corner. The farmer thought that once it recovered, the wolf would be grateful and leave. But as its wounds healed, the wolf's true nature gradually emerged. It began to growl, wreak havoc, and one day turned and killed the sheep the farmer had been raising for so long. The farmer was heartbroken and resentful. He couldn't understand why, after saving the wolf's life, he received such a fate. But the ancients, looking at this story, stated frankly that it wasn't the wolf that was ungrateful, but the farmer who was wrong from the start. He had used compassion to treat an animal incapable of changing its nature. A wolf doesn't become a sheep just because it's saved. Someone accustomed to living off their own interests won't suddenly show gratitude just because you're kind to them. When you help the wrong person, you not only waste your effort, but you also create the conditions for their bad nature to turn against you. In life, there are many wolves in sheep's clothing. They are very good at complaining about their hardships. They tell compelling stories of their circumstances. They make others believe that if they are helped, they will change. But in reality, they are just looking for someone to bear the consequences for them. Once they get what they need, they leave or return to hurt the very person who helped them. A wise person isn't someone who doesn't help anyone. A wise person is someone who clearly sees who they are helping and why they are helping. Are they helping that person get back on their feet, or helping them continue to be dependent? Are they helping them learn a lesson they need to learn, or helping them evade responsibility? The ancients said that when helping someone, you should look at their heart, not their words. Words can be very eloquent, but the heart is revealed through long-term actions. A person worthy of help is someone who, even in hardship, maintains integrity and righteousness. A person not worthy of help is someone who always blames life and others, but never looks at themselves. Some people make all sorts of promises when offered help, but turn their backs once they're standing on solid ground. Others, after being helped, become dependent, believing you have a responsibility to continue helping them. At that point, your initial kindness becomes a rope that binds you. The ancients called this self-inflicted karma due to a lack of awareness. Helping the wrong person harms you, not because you're selfish, but because you've misplaced your kindness. Kindness itself isn't wrong. The mistake lies in not knowing your limits. When you give without observing or considering the consequences, you're empowering others to hurt you. Wise people always adhere to a very clear principle when helping others. Help within their means. Help without sacrificing their own peace of mind. Help, but not cover up mistakes. Help others stand on their own 2 feet, not carry them through life. There are times when refusing help isn't cruel, but wise. There are times when not intervening is the most profound form of help. Because only when you don't help the wrong person will the other person be forced to confront themselves. If you've ever been hurt by helping the wrong people, don't blame yourself for being foolish. It only proves that you've lived a truly sincere life. But after each painful experience, wisdom needs to emerge. Kindness must be accompanied by discernment. Otherwise, you'll repeat the same lesson with different faces. Ancient wisdom teaches that a truly blessed person is not the one who gives the most, but the one who knows how to give wisely. To the right person, at the right time, in the right amount, and who knows when to stop. If you're at the stage of learning to say no, remember that not everyone who asks for your help deserves it. Keeping some things to yourself doesn't make you a bad person. On the contrary, it allows you to have the strength to help those who truly deserve it. If this article resonates with you, please share it with someone who has suffered greatly because of their kindness. And if you want to continue listening to wisdom that helps you live more mindfully and peacefully each day, please subscribe to the channel. Each subscription is not only a show of support, but also a reminder that kindness needs to be directed in the right place to become a blessing, not a source of pain. 4. In life, many people are exhausted, not because they lack ability, but because they cling to too many unnecessary things. They want more money, more fame, more connections, more opportunities, more experiences. They want to grasp everything. They fear missing every opportunity. By the time they look back, their hands are full, their hearts are troubled, and there is no room left for their minds to find peace. The ancients recognized the root cause of this weariness very early on. They taught that wisdom doesn't begin with accumulating more, but with knowing when to let go. Those who don't know how to resist temptation are dragged along by desires their whole lives. Only those who know how to resist are truly masters of themselves. Temptation isn't just about money or lust. It's also about praise, attention, the feeling of being important, and the opportunity to be better than others. Without clear thinking, these things can easily lead people astray. We think we're moving forward, but in reality, we're just chasing things that weigh down our minds. The ancients said that not everything needs to be grasped. Some things, when grasped, bring blessings. But some things, when grasped, bring negative karma. The difference lies not in the thing itself, but in the level of awareness of the person grasping it. There is a very famous Zen story, passed down through generations, about a full cup. This story is simple but contains profound wisdom. The story goes that a student sought out a Zen master, hoping to learn the Dharma. This student had read many books, possessed extensive knowledge of various theories, and was filled with his own thoughts and opinions. When he met the Zen master, he spoke at length about his knowledge, the philosophies he had learned, and his achievements. He believed that the more he spoke, the more the Zen master would respect him. The Zen master listened silently, without interrupting. When the disciple finished speaking, he invited him to have tea. The Zen master poured tea into the disciple's cup. The tea rose to the brim, but he continued pouring. The tea overflowed the table and spilled onto the floor. The disciple cried out in alarm that the cup was full and no more could be poured. The Zen master then gently said, "Your mind is like this cup. It's already full of what you think is right. If you don't empty some out, how can you fill it with something new?" This story is not only about learning the way, but also about how people face temptations in life. When our hearts are filled with desires, expectations, and greed, there is no room for peace. We want to hold on to everything that comes our way. We want to seize every opportunity. But the more we grasp, the more we tire. The more we hold on, the more we fear losing it. The strongest temptation isn't something that causes immediate suffering, but something that makes us think we're gaining something. We take on extra work for fear of missing out on opportunities. We build relationships for fear of offending others. We chase fame for fear of being forgotten. But in return, we lose our inner peace. Wise people are not immune to temptation. They also find things attractive and have desires. But the difference is that they know when to stop. They know how to ask themselves whether something is truly necessary for their lives. Does it lighten their hearts or weigh them down? Does it help them live true to their values or pull them away from it? The ancients taught that those who do not know contentment will never have enough, no matter how much they possess. Those who know contentment will find peace even with little. Knowing contentment is not resignation, but wisdom. It means knowing your limits, knowing when to advance and when to stop. Rejecting temptation isn't about depriving yourself. On the contrary, it's a way to protect your life energy. When you don't cling to unnecessary things, you have the strength to do well what truly matters. When you don't chase after glamorous allurements, you have time to listen to yourself. Many people reach a point in their lives where they realize that what they need most is not more, but less. Less meaningless relationships, less unnecessary expectations, less inappropriate ambitions. When you let go, your heart naturally expands. When your heart expands, blessings naturally come. The ancients called this the wisdom of letting go. Letting go isn't about abandoning everything, but about not being dragged along. Hold on to what you need to hold on to, and let go of what only weighs you down. If you're feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, ask yourself what's filling the cup in your heart. Perhaps it's time to empty it, not to lose it all, but to make room for peace. Rejecting temptation is the first step towards wisdom, because from the moment you dare to say no to unnecessary things, you begin to live your own life instead of living according to what others expect. And that is the deepest foundation of a peaceful life. 5. In life, many people don't dare to say no, not because they don't know what's right, but because they're afraid. Afraid of being disliked. Afraid of being called selfish. Afraid of getting a bad reputation. Afraid that if they say no, others will leave. And it is this fear that gradually causes them to lose themselves without realizing it. People who don't dare to say no often live according to the opinions of others. They adjust their words, actions, and even emotions to please those around them. Initially, they are praised for being cute, kind, and enthusiastic. But over time, they become increasingly exhausted because they have to strain to maintain that image, even though they are completely drained inside. The ancients said that fearing to displease others is tantamount to displeasing oneself. When you constantly prioritize the feelings of others over your own, you are teaching yourself that you are unimportant. Over time, self-esteem erodes. The heart becomes weak. And when the heart is weak, people are easily manipulated. There's an old story about a merchant who was very popular with his customers. He always smiled and spoke warmly, and he always accommodated his customers' requests. He sold to customers at low prices and agreed to pay later. He even took the blame for unreasonable complaints. Everyone praised him as a conscientious merchant, but only he knew that with each passing day, he grew more tired. The profit margin was shrinking. He sold a lot of goods, but received little money. At times, he had to borrow money to keep the working capital running. But for fear of losing customers, he didn't dare change his approach. He feared that if he became stricter, customers would leave. Gradually, decent customers started buying less because they found the prices unstable. Expensive customers, on the other hand, became even more aggressive. They became accustomed to haggling, delaying payments, and even defaulting on debts. The merchant fell into a vicious cycle with no way out. Ultimately, he went bankrupt. Not because he was cunning or incompetent, but because he didn't dare refuse. That story isn't just true in business, but in many relationships. When you always give in, others get used to you yielding. When you don't set boundaries, others will treat them as non-existent. And when you're exhausted, very few people notice because they're used to receiving without asking. Wise people understand that it's impossible to please everyone. Trying to satisfy everyone is the quickest way to lose yourself, because everyone has different needs and expectations. If you chase after everyone, you'll find yourself standing nowhere. The ancients taught that kindness must be accompanied by steadfastness. Kindness without steadfastness becomes weakness. When you know when to refuse, you don't become a bad person. You're simply stating your boundaries. Those who respect you will understand. Those who don't respect you will reveal their true feelings. The fear of being disliked is a very human fear. But ask yourself, if you have to live against your true self just to avoid being disliked, is that price worth it? There are people who will hate you no matter how much you try to please them. And there are people who will respect you more if you dare to say no. The ancients said that those who live righteously will never lack those who understand them. You might lose a few superficial relationships, but you will retain genuine ones. And more importantly, you will maintain inner peace. Refusal isn't about cutting ties. Refusal is about filtering. Filtering people. Filtering relationships. Filtering yourself. When you dare to refuse things that hurt you, you're choosing to stand by yourself. If you're living in fear of displeasing others and feeling increasingly insignificant, remember that you weren't born to please everyone. You were born to live a life of value and peace. And that starts with daring to say no when necessary. Maintaining one's integrity is not selfishness, it's self-respect. And self-respect is the foundation of all healthy relationships. 6. Many people believe that freedom means doing what they like, saying what they want, and reacting according to their emotions. But the ancients saw things differently. They said that a truly free person is one who is not swayed by emotions. Because when anger arises and we cannot control it, we are no longer masters of our own lives. The strongest and most dangerous human emotion is anger. Anger blinds the mind. Anger causes words to overreact. Anger drives people to make decisions they will regret for the rest of their lives when they calm down. Some relationships break down because of a fit of anger. Some opportunities are lost because of a moment of uncontrolled rage. And some destinies take a different turn simply because one failed to overcome their own emotions. The ancients said that those who conquer anger conquer their destiny, because destiny isn't always determined by circumstances, but often by our reaction to those circumstances. In the same situation, those who know how to control their emotions will navigate it smoothly. Those who let their emotions lead them will create more negative karma for themselves. Controlling emotions doesn't mean suppressing them or pretending to be calm. It's the ability to recognize when an emotion arises and not let it take control. When you see anger without being swept away by it, you've stepped out of it. And at that very moment, freedom begins to emerge. Ancient people used many images to illustrate this point. One of the most profound stories is that of the Zen master who placed a stone in the middle of the stream. The story goes that there was a Zen master who lived near a large river. The river flowed swiftly, and during the rainy season, its waters would rise, sweeping away everything in their path. One day, someone asked the Zen master how to keep one's mind undisturbed by the vicissitudes of life. The Zen master didn't answer immediately, but instead led the person to the riverbank. He took a large stone and placed it in the middle of the fast-flowing water. The water struck the stone, swirled around it, and splashed white foam. But the stone remained still, unmoved and unswept. The Zen master said that water is like circumstances, like the words and actions of others. The stone is like a mind that has been trained. When the mind is strong enough, circumstances cannot pull it away. The Zen master added that if the stone is light, it will be swept away. If the mind is light and weak, emotions will drag it down. To avoid being swept away, one should not try to block the flow of water, but rather make one's mind heavy and firm enough. That story speaks a profound truth. We cannot control everything that happens in life. We cannot stop others from saying things that upset us. We cannot avoid all injustice. but we can train how we react. And that is the only place where we truly have a choice. People who can't control their emotions often live very tiring lives. They are tossed up and down by every word of others. A compliment makes them happy. A criticism makes them sad. An unpleasant glance is enough to make them restless all day. Their hearts are like dry leaves, blown wherever the wind blows. Conversely, people who know how to control their emotions are not those who are never angry. They still get angry, but they don't let anger lead them astray. They stop. They observe. They let the emotion pass like a wave. Waves come and go. The sea remains the sea. The ancients taught that self-cultivation begins with cultivating the mind. Cultivating the mind begins with cultivating emotions. When you overcome anger, you not only avoid mistakes, but also preserve blessings. Much of life's blessings are squandered due to irrational reactions. There are people who work hard their whole lives, live decent lives, but lose all their reputation because of a single moment of anger. There are families that were once harmonious, but a lack of control over words spoken in anger leaves a crack that can never be mended. These prices are very high, but they are often only realized when it's too late. Controlling your emotions isn't something you do in a day. It's a process of gradual training. Start by recognizing when emotions arise. Notice your heart beating faster. Notice your breathing becoming more rapid. Notice the urge to say harsh words. Just by recognizing them, you're no longer completely controlled by them. The ancients advised that when angry, one should stop. Stop speaking, stop making decisions, stop reacting. Just give yourself space, and the anger will subside. When the anger subsides, wisdom will have room to emerge. Those who master their emotions are not weak, but very strong. Much stronger than those who always react instinctively, because they are not dictated by circumstances. They do not relinquish control of their lives to others. True freedom doesn't lie externally. Freedom lies in not being swayed by emotions. When you are no longer driven by anger, you have the right to choose how you live. And that is the deepest root of a peaceful life. If you find yourself easily angered, easily hurt, or easily disturbed by others' words, don't blame yourself. It's simply a sign that you need to train your mind more. Each time you manage to restrain your anger, you move closer to freedom. If this article makes you reflect on yourself, please share it with a loved one, someone who is often emotionally exhausted. And if you want to continue listening to wisdom that helps cultivate the mind, maintain happiness, and live peacefully amidst life's storms, please subscribe to the channel. Every time you choose to be calm instead of angry, you are silently changing the direction of your own destiny. 7. In life, there are things that hurt others very quickly, but also turn around and harm oneself just as quickly. Words are one of them. A single sentence can soothe a lifetime, but it can also ruin a great undertaking. Therefore, the ancients considered controlling one's speech, that is, controlling one's words, as a very important path to cultivating blessings. Many people believe that words are just like the wind. Once spoken, they're gone. But in reality, words carry the heart. The words reflect the heart. And once words are spoken, they cannot be taken back. They enter the ears of others, touch their emotions, and create consequences that sometimes the speaker themselves cannot foresee. Ancient wisdom teaches that speaking little keeps the mind calm, speaking truthfully keeps the intellect clear, and speaking kindly preserves blessings. These three things may seem simple, but they present a great challenge in life. When emotions run high, people easily talk too much. When the ego is hurt, it's easy to say the wrong thing. And when wanting to win, it's easy to say hurtful things. People who can't control their words often live with regret. They say things that satisfy their momentary emotions, but later pay the price with relationships, reputation, and even their careers. A moment of careless speech can cost years of correction. An ancient tale recounts a story about a saying that ruined a great undertaking. It happened in ancient times, when a young, highly talented official was favored by the court. Intelligent, decisive, and efficient, he was entrusted with a major responsibility concerning the fate of the entire region. During a council meeting, overly confident in his abilities, he uttered a remark that seemed to belittle the opinion of an elderly minister. The remark wasn't harsh, but it was enough to offend the listeners. The atmosphere immediately changed. Those present fell silent, but suspicion arose in their hearts. The old minister didn't react immediately. He just smiled and remained silent. But from that day on, he no longer wholeheartedly supported the young official. Others gradually distanced themselves as well. Work that required coordination became difficult. The young official's proposals were no longer as well received as before. Ultimately, the grand plan failed. The young official then realized that it wasn't a lack of talent, but a single remark that had shaken his confidence. It took him many years before he had a chance to start over, but the scar in his heart was not easily erased. The ancients used this story to remind us that words not only convey information, but also attitude. Arrogance, contempt, and a competitive spirit, even when hidden behind gentle words, can still be sensed by others. And once trust is broken, it is very difficult to mend. Wise people don't use words to win over others. They use words to maintain harmony. They understand that winning with words, but losing in someone's heart, is a great defeat. Sometimes, silence is better than speaking. Sometimes, a gentle word can save an entire relationship. Controlling one's speech doesn't mean saying nothing at all. It means speaking when necessary, saying the right things, and speaking with a heart that doesn't hurt. Before speaking, wise people usually ask themselves three things. Is this necessary? Is this true? And will this hurt anyone? If the answer to all three questions is no, they choose silence. That silence is not a sign of weakness, but rather self-control. It shows that the person is not controlled by emotions and does not need words to assert their ego. The ancients said that the mouth is the gateway to fortune and misfortune. Fortune comes from the mouth, and misfortune also comes from the mouth. Those who often speak harshly, sarcastically, and judgmentally diminish their own fortune. Even if they are talented, others will find it difficult to wholeheartedly support them. Conversely, those who speak gently, moderately, and know how to save face for others are easily helped wherever they go. There are people who don't talk much, but every time they speak, they are listened to. Not because they speak eloquently, but because they speak at the right time and in the right place. Their words are free from any sense of superiority or inferiority, thus building trust. That is the sweet fruit of long-term self-cultivation of speech. In family life, words are even more important. An angry word can leave a deeper wound than an action. Some wounds are invisible, but they stay with people for a lifetime. Many family grievances begin with seemingly unintentional words. The ancients taught that to have a peaceful family life, one must first control their speech. To have a lasting career, one must be even more careful with their words. Because the higher one rises, the more weight each word carries. The more people listen, the greater the impact of a single statement. Controlling one's speech isn't about becoming withdrawn, but about becoming more profound. When you speak less, you listen more. When you listen more, you understand others better. When you understand more, you say fewer mistakes. And when you say fewer mistakes, blessings naturally arise. If you're in a phase where you're prone to saying things you'll regret, slow down. Before you speak, let your mind beat faster than your mouth. Just that one beat can prevent a lot of trouble. If this article makes you reflect on how you speak every day, please share it with a loved one, someone you wish would live a more peaceful life. And if you want to continue cultivating the wisdom of the ancients, to preserve blessings, maintain a pure heart, and cherish precious things in life, please follow the channel. Every wise saying, when carefully chosen, not only saves a relationship, but also subtly creates a more sustainable life. 8. In life, much suffering doesn't come from lack, but from excessive desire. Desire, if guided by wisdom, becomes a driving force. But when desire gets out of control, it becomes a binding chain, draining one's energy without realizing it. Ancient people viewed desire as a kind of fire. A small fire provides warmth. A large fire consumes. Human suffering doesn't stem from desire itself, but from being led astray by desire. When desire takes control, reason retreats. When reason retreats, mistakes occur. And when mistakes are repeated many times, strength gradually diminishes. Vitality is not just physical health. Vitality is mental strength, clarity of mind, and the ability to stand firm against temptation. Those with strong vitality are less easily swayed. Those with weak vitality are easily drawn into the cycle of fleeting gratification. After gratification, they feel empty. Emptiness leads to seeking gratification again. This cycle continues, leading to exhaustion and depletion. The ancients said that excessive greed leads to suffering. The suffering isn't at the beginning, but later. Initially, desires are always cloaked in sweetness. They promise joy, benefits, and a feeling of superiority. But the true price only becomes apparent when a person has gone too far. There is an old story about a bird hunter and his sweet trap. That story has been passed down as a cautionary tale about lust. The story goes that there was a very skilled hunter. He didn't use large nets or powerful weapons, but rather sophisticated traps. He observed the birds very carefully and realized that birds weren't afraid of traps. They were only afraid of hunger. So he placed the most fragrant and delicious grains in the traps. The birds were initially very wary, but the enticing scent was irresistible. They thought they could just peck a little and fly away. But once they stepped into the trap, their feet got caught. The more they struggled, the tighter the trap became. In the end, they didn't die of starvation, but from their inability to control their initial urge. The hunter looked at the scene and said coldly, "Birds don't die from traps. They die from greed." The ancients used this story to talk about human nature. Many traps in life don't have sharp thorns. They have a sweet scent. They have promises. They have a pleasant feeling. But once you step into them, it's very difficult to get out unscathed. Desires can be money, power, fame, pleasure, attention, or admiration. Not all of them are bad. But when we lose control, when we sacrifice our health, character, and peace of mind to satisfy them, the price to pay will inevitably come sooner or later. People who cannot control their desires often live very tiring lives. They are always in a state of lack. Even when they have something, they still feel it's not enough. Once they achieve something, they want more. Their minds never rest. And when the mind is restless, the body is also restless. Gradually, this leads to illness, anxiety, and unease. The ancients called this energy depletion. Energy depletion leads to decline. Decline affects not only the body, but also one's fortune. When energy is weak, people are more likely to make wrong decisions, be easily misled, and fall into temptation. And when fortune turns against them, they realize they have wasted too much on things they didn't truly need. Wise people don't suppress desire. They subdue desire. They know that humans cannot live without desires. But desire must be in one's own hands, not the other way around. Then, desire ceases to be a trap and becomes energy used wisely. The ancients taught that knowing when you have enough is true wealth. Wealth here doesn't mean having a lot, but rather not lacking. Not lacking a sense of security. Not lacking self-control. Not lacking the strength to go the distance. People who know how to control their desires often have a very distinct characteristic. They are not in a hurry. They are not hasty. They are not swept away by trends or comparisons. They live more slowly, but more surely. They choose simple, lasting joys instead of intense but fleeting pleasures. Some young people expend their energy very quickly because they live too fast. They stay up late, indulge excessively, and chase thrills. By the time they reach the latter half of their lives, they find themselves empty and exhausted. At that point, it's difficult to turn back and preserve their energy. Our ancestors had a far-sighted vision. They taught that preserving one's vital energy is the foundation of life. As long as the roots remain, the tree will live. If the roots are damaged, the leaves and flowers will only be temporary. Controlling desires doesn't diminish life. On the contrary, it deepens it. When you're not dragged down by cravings, you can truly appreciate the small but enduring things. A peaceful meal, a deep sleep, a mind free from torment. If you're feeling inexplicably tired, try looking back and see what you're overgratulating. It might not be because life is too difficult, but rather because you've unknowingly stepped too close to tempting traps. Keeping desires under control is preserving one's vitality. Preserving vitality means preserving one's long-term path. And that is one of the most important foundations for living peacefully and sustainably amidst a world full of temptations. 9. People often talk about money as the most precious thing, but the ancients saw things more deeply. What truly determines the quality of a person's life is not money, but time. Money lost can be earned back. Time, once gone, is gone forever. Therefore, the ancients called managing time the key to preserving life. Many people don't die from illness, but from wasting their time. Each day that passes unconsciously, following habits, chasing unnecessary things, is a day their lives are shortened without them realizing it. Time is not just the number of hours on a clock. Time is life energy. It is spirit. It is longevity. It is the opportunity to improve oneself and accumulate blessings. Those who use time haphazardly have a chaotic mind. A chaotic mind leads to a chaotic life. Those who know how to manage time have a stable mind. A stable mind leads to a peaceful life. The ancients said, "Life is finite, but human desires are boundless. Life is limited, but desires are limitless." If we don't manage our time, we will spend our entire lives chasing after things that lead nowhere. There's an old story about two people who spent the same day together, but whose lives ended up in vastly different ways. The story goes that there were two friends born in a small village. They were the same age, the same healthy, and started each day with exactly 24 hours. Neither had more time than the other. The first man lived a very spontaneous life. Every morning he woke up without a plan. He did whatever came his way. He went wherever he was invited. In his free time, he would sit around chatting, letting the days pass by. He often said, "Life is long. What's the hurry?" Things that needed to be done for the future were always postponed until tomorrow. The second man lived a quieter life. He didn't do anything grand, but each day was orderly. He set aside time for work, study, rest, and family. He didn't waste time on meaningless pleasures, nor did he allow himself to become lazy. He often said, "Each day that passes is one less day of life." Years passed, and the first man remained busy, but accumulated nothing. He lamented that life was unfair, that luck wasn't on his side, and that he was unlucky. His health deteriorated due to his irregular lifestyle, and his mind was weary from constantly feeling short of time, even though he had actually wasted a great deal. The second man wasn't exceptionally wealthy, but his life was stable. His family was happy and harmonious. His health was good, and his mind was clear. In his old age, he looked back and found no regrets for having used his time to build his life brick by brick. Two people use the same day, but one uses it to deplete their life force, while the other uses it to nourish their life force. The ancients used that story to remind us that time is not fair in the way we think. It is fair in terms of quantity, but unfair in how each person uses it. And it is this way of using it that determines one's destiny. People who don't manage their time often live in a state of being dragged along. dragged by trivial tasks, dragged by fleeting emotions, dragged by unnecessary requests, dragged by pleasures that numb their minds. They are always busy but make no progress, always tired but don't know why. The ancients called this slow decay of life. Slow decay of life doesn't mean dying immediately, but rather living in a state of slow deterioration. Day after day, the spirit dries up, the will weakens, and the body deteriorates accordingly. Wise people don't try to do too many things. They choose what to do. They know that saying no to something unimportant is like saying yes to their own life. Each timely refusal saves energy for what truly matters. Managing your time isn't about forcing yourself to live a stressful life. On the contrary, it's a way to live more lightly. When you know what to do and what to let go of, your mind won't be torn apart. When your mind isn't torn apart, time becomes deeper, slower, and more valuable. The ancients taught that one day lived mindfully is better than 100 days lived in a dream. A mindful person knows how they are using their time, whether for learning or comparison, for nurturing their mind and body, or for excessive entertainment. Every small choice is silently rewriting their destiny. Time is the only asset each person receives at birth, and it is also the only thing that is certain to be lost. No one knows how many days they have left, but everyone has the right to decide how to use each day. Preserving time is preserving life. Preserving life isn't just about extending your lifespan, but about living fully in each remaining day. When you begin to value time, you'll naturally let go of unimportant things, avoid meaningless temptations, and return to what nourishes you from within. If you feel life is passing by too quickly today, take a moment to pause. Not to do more work, but to reflect on who you are spending your time on and what you are giving it to. Because it is there that you will clearly see whether you are holding on to or losing your own life. 10. Comparison is one of the most subtle yet devastating habits affecting a person's inner life. The ancients didn't call it a fault, but rather delusion. Delusion stemming from not seeing oneself, only seeing others. Delusion from using the lives of others as a measure of one's own happiness. And when the mind becomes accustomed to comparison, even in the midst of happiness, one still feels insecure. The ancients said, when the human heart is not satisfied, it desires 10 after receiving one. But what causes human suffering is not lack, but comparing oneself to others and feeling inadequate. Comparison fuels feelings of dissatisfaction, keeping the heart restless no matter how external circumstances change. Those who cannot control their tendency to compare themselves to others will live in a state of being dragged along. They feel inferior when they see others doing better. They become envious when they see others doing better than them. They become arrogant when they see others doing worse than them. These three states alternate, never allowing the mind to rest. And when the mind is restless, blessings will not remain. Ancient wisdom holds that comparison is like taking someone else's path and walking into your own dead end. Each person is born with a different foundation, circumstances, and pace of life. Trying to fit someone else's pace into your own will only lead to disharmony and exhaustion. There is an old story about two trees in the forest, which wise men used to illustrate the root of misfortune. In a forest, there were two trees growing close together. One was tall, straight, and had a wide canopy, always receiving plenty of sunlight. The other was shorter, with a curved trunk, living in the shade of the first tree. Every day, the shorter tree would look up and lament. Why am I not as tall as it? Why does the sunlight always belong to it, while I must live in the shade? The more it compared itself to others, the sadder the tree became. It felt inferior, useless, and even resented the forest that had given birth to it this way. Meanwhile, the taller tree was completely unaware of the envy it was feeling. It simply continued to grow silently, enduring the wind, the rain, the lightning, and the storms. One year, a great storm swept through the forest. The wind was fierce, and lightning flashed incessantly. Tall trees, standing exposed to the wind from all directions, had large branches broken off by lightning and suffered severe damage to their trunks. Meanwhile, shorter trees, sheltered under the canopy and held firmly in place by their extensive root systems, were largely unaffected. After the storm, the short tree realized that it was its shape and location that had helped it survive. What it had once envied was what had put the other tree in greater danger. At that moment, the tree understood that every tree's shape has a reason for existing, and no shape is superfluous. The ancients used that story to remind us that comparisons only show us the surface, never the price paid behind it. We see others succeeding, but we don't see the sleepless nights they spent. We see others wealthy, but we don't see the pressure they bear. We see others living comfortably, but we don't see the silent sacrifices they made. Comparison causes people to lose sight of the present. When comparing, the mind is always outside of oneself. It's in other people's homes, in other people's lives, in what one doesn't have. Meanwhile, blessings only arise when the mind turns inward, when people learn to appreciate what they have and nurture it properly. Wise people don't forbid themselves from observing others, but they don't let their minds wander in comparisons. They observe to learn, not to belittle or elevate themselves. They understand that life isn't a race of speed, but a journey of depth. Some people go fast, some go slow, but no one can go it for another. The ancients taught, comparing yourself to others brings suffering, but self-reflection brings enlightenment. When people turn inward to examine themselves, they begin to see their own limitations and capabilities. They see what they are suited for and what they are not. They see where they are and how they need to move forward. At that point, comparison naturally falls away because it no longer has a place in a mind that has understood itself. Comparison is also a thief of joy. A satisfying meal can become bland if we look at someone else's lavish feast. A warm home can feel cramped if we compare it to a luxurious villa. But if we let go of comparison, joy returns to its simplest form, being able to eat, to sleep, to live peacefully. Those who cannot control their comparisons are never satisfied. They achieve one thing and immediately look for something else. They have a little more and see others having even more. And so, their minds constantly wander without knowing where they are going. And when the mind becomes accustomed to wandering, even when it stops, it feels empty. The ancients called this state a scattered mind. A scattered mind scatters blessings. Family life is difficult to maintain. Relationships are hard to sustain, and health is hard to preserve. This is not because life is harsh, but because the mind constantly creates turmoil for itself. Controlling comparison isn't about forcing yourself to be satisfied with everything, but about knowing the difference between learning and self-torture. Learning helps you progress. Comparison drags you down. When you learn from others, your mind opens. When you compare yourself to others, your mind closes. Ancient wisdom teaches that fortunate people are those who know how to remain at their own pace. They don't rush because they see others moving fast, nor do they become discouraged because they see others progressing faster. They understand that as long as they stay on the right path, sooner or later they will reach their destination. When you stop comparing yourself to others, your mind will become much lighter. Lighter because you no longer have to prove yourself. Lighter because you no longer have to compete. Lighter because you no longer have to live someone else's life. And when your mind is light, blessings will naturally come to you. Comparison is the root of unhappiness, not because others are better than us, but because we forget that we have a life to live fully. Maintaining inner peace in the face of comparison is maintaining great blessings. Because those who maintain inner peace, no matter where they are or what circumstances they face, will not lose themselves. 11. In life, there is something that looks beautiful, but erodes one's fortune very quickly. Empty fame. The ancients did not deny the value of fame, but always warned about its trap. True fame comes from virtue and ability, while empty fame comes from ostentation and the desire for recognition. A wise person is not someone without fame, but someone who knows how to reject fame that cannot sustain them, cannot protect their home, and cannot bring peace of mind. Many people are exhausted their whole lives, not because of a lack of money, but because they carry too much burden of reputation. They fear losing their image, their good name, and the possibility of no longer being remembered. Because of this fear, they take on unnecessary work. Because of this fear, they participate in meaningless competitions. Because of this fear, they sacrifice their time, health, and even their dearest loved ones. The ancients said that fame without substance is like a reflection on water. It's there to be seen, but it vanishes upon touch. To preserve that reflection, one must stand under the sun, unwilling to leave. Only when exhausted does one realize that what one has guarded for so long cannot protect oneself from the rain and wind. There's an old story about a talented, kind-hearted man with a happy family. He wasn't famous or powerful, but his life was comfortable and peaceful. One day, he was nominated for a prestigious position. The position didn't make him richer, but it brought him fame, respect, and praise. Initially, he was very hesitant. He knew that accepting the position meant less time for family, more pressure, and more complicated relationships. But everyone around him advised against it. Some said it was a rare opportunity. Others said not accepting it would be a waste of a lifetime. Still others said this position would bring honor to his descendants. Hearing so much, his heart wavered. Finally, he took office. From then on, his life gradually changed. He became busier and more away from home. Family meals became less frequent. Conversations with his wife and children became shorter. He was constantly concerned with maintaining his image, reputation, and good name in front of everyone. Every decision had to be carefully considered in terms of what others might think. The family began to fall apart. The children grew distant due to the absence of their father. His wife became accustomed to waiting in silence. When he returned home, his mind was still elsewhere, preoccupied with work and reputation. Gradually, home ceased to be a place of rest, becoming merely a place to visit. Years later, having achieved considerable fame, he looked back and found his family shattered. His children grew up in a void. His wife was weary and distant. Only then did he realize that fame had given him reputation, but it had taken away things that could never be compensated for. Fame could not sustain him when he fell ill from overwork. Fame could not warm his home when his wife and children were cold-hearted. Fame could not turn back time either. The ancients used that story to remind us that some things seem very high, but the higher you climb, the more isolated you become. False fame is often accompanied by the expectations of others, rather than one's own genuine needs. When chasing false fame, people live more in the eyes of the world than in their own hearts. Wise people understand that fame is merely a means, not an end. If fame helps one do good deeds, protect their family, and uphold moral principles, then it is a worthy achievement. But if fame is only for the sake of praise, admiration, and superiority over others, then the price to pay is often very high. The ancients said that this body is the root. Family is the root. Health is the root. Peace of mind is the root. If all fame and fortune harm that root, and no matter how beautiful they may be, they should be let go of. Letting go is not because of incompetence, but because one has seen through it. Those who reject empty fame are not incompetent, but rather wise enough to know when enough is enough. They don't need to prove themselves to the whole world. They only need to maintain their roles in the most important relationships. There are those who are quiet and unassuming, yet have warm families, obedient children, and peaceful souls. There are also those who were once famous, but end up lonely, ill, and full of regrets in their old age. The ancients didn't threaten, but gently pointed out that every choice leaves its mark. Fame cannot sustain the body, but the body must sustain fame. When the body is weary and the mind is empty, fame also becomes a burden. Wise people choose to live lightly, honestly, and with just enough. They do not despise fame, but they do not sell their lives for it. If you ever find yourself faced with a seemingly prestigious invitation, ask yourself if it will distance you from your family or take away your peace of mind. If the answer is yes, then refusing it is not a loss, but a way to preserve your own blessings. Ancient wisdom teaches that knowing when enough is true wealth, and knowing when to let go is true strength. Rejecting empty fame is a form of quiet strength, but it is this quiet strength that allows one to go far and find peace on the path of life. 12. In the journey of growing up, there's a painful but essential lesson: learning to reject toxic relationships. Not everyone who enters our lives should be kept close. Not everyone we've known should stay with us until the end. The ancients didn't teach us to coldly sever ties, but rather to be discerning enough to know who to stay with, who to let go of, who is a blessing, and who is merely a burden that weighs down our hearts. Many people are exhausted not because life is too harsh, but because they carry too many people who are no longer suitable. They hold on for memories, out of politeness or out of fear of being seen as heartless. They try to endure hurtful words and draining behavior, simply because they think letting go is wrong. But the ancients clearly said that holding on to the wrong person is more harmful than letting go of the right one. Toxic relationships aren't always loud or awful from the start. Sometimes it's someone who constantly complains, weighing you down. Sometimes it's someone who always demands, but never gives. Sometimes it's someone who forces you to put on a brave face, to pretend, to be someone you're not whenever you're around. At first, you think you can handle it, but the longer it goes on, the more exhausted you become. Ancient wisdom teaches that the mind is like water. Clear water brings coolness. Murky water causes illness. If you constantly pour dirty things into it every day, sooner or later, the stream will no longer be pure. The same is true for people. If you allow relationships that hurt your mind to persist for too long, your peace will gradually disappear. There's an old story about a boatman crossing a river. His boat was loaded with a lot of luggage. At first, the river was calm, and the boat moved slowly but steadily. But the further they went, the stronger the current became. The boat started to rock. More and more water flooded in. The boatman tried his best to bail out the water, but the more he bailed, the more tired he became. A man on the bank shouted for him to throw away some of his luggage, but he shook his head. It was precious, something he had carried with him for years. He would regret throwing it away. He tried to row on, but the current waited for no one. Finally, the boat tilted violently. He was forced to throw some of his luggage overboard to save his life. As the boat lightened, the current remained strong, but he had enough strength to row across. Reaching the other side, he looked back and realized that if he had tried to hold on to everything, he wouldn't be here to regret it. Some things seem precious, but when circumstances change, they become a burden. The ancients used that story to remind us that life is like rowing a boat. When the current is calm, we can carry many things, but when we enter a stormy phase, we are forced to choose. We cannot hold on to everything and hope to go far. We cannot protect ourselves while dragging along relationships that will sink us. Knowing how to reject toxic relationships isn't ingratitude. It's self-preservation. Some people come into our lives to teach us a lesson and then leave. If we try to hold on, the lesson will turn into suffering. The ancients said, cherish relationships when they come and let them go when they end. Forcing relationships to stay only breeds resentment. Many people are afraid to let go because they think they will be lonely. But in reality, being in a toxic relationship is far more lonely. Lonely because you're not understood. Lonely because you can't be yourself. Lonely because you have to pretend every day. Let go. It may feel empty at first, but then your heart will lighten. and healthier relationships will have room to enter. The ancients taught that wise people don't need many friends, only the right ones. The right person is someone who brings peace to your heart after meeting them. Someone who doesn't make you doubt your own worth. Someone who can be silently by your side without making you feel burdened. If a relationship makes you increasingly tired and smaller, that's a clear sign. Letting go isn't about cutting ties and resentment. Letting go is about withdrawing with mindfulness. No blaming. No winning or losing. Simply understanding that the paths have diverged. When our minds are strong enough, letting go won't hurt as much as we imagine. The ancients said that maintaining inner peace is a great blessing. Any relationship that diminishes that blessing should be reevaluated. Not everyone needs to be kept close. Not everyone is worthy of accompanying us through the important stages of life. When you learn to lighten your load, the boat of your life will be lighter. Lighter to travel further. Lighter so you won't sink in the middle of the stream. And lighter so you'll have enough energy to enjoy the scenery on both sides. Knowing how to refuse toxic relationships is a form of silent wisdom. But it's the wisdom that helps people live longer, live more peacefully, and live more authentically each day. 13. Among the things the ancients always warned people to be wary of, greed stands out. Not because greed is absolutely bad, but because greed without limits will silently drain a person's blessings throughout their life. The ancients said that quick greed leads to quick loss. This wasn't just a scare tactic, but a consequence that has been repeated through countless lives. Greed often begins very small. A little desire to be better than others. A little desire to get things faster. A little desire to take shortcuts instead of the long road. Initially, it's like motivation. But when left unchecked, greed becomes thirst. And thirst never knows when enough is enough. The more you drink, the drier your throat becomes. Greedy people often live in a state of haste. Hasty to make money. Hasty to succeed. Hasty to win or lose. They lack the patience to accumulate wealth, the composure to wait. Every opportunity that comes their way, they want to seize, even without checking whether it's land or a deep pit. And many times, this haste leads them to irreversible losses. The ancients taught that blessings are like water in a lake. Take what is appropriate, and the lake will remain. Take too much, and the lake will dry up. Once the lake dries up, even if it rains later, it will take a very long time to fill it again. Those who know how to refuse greed are those who know how to preserve the underground water source for their lives. There is an old story about a gold miner, passed down as a profound cautionary tale. He was poor. Hearing that there was a gold mine in the mountains, he abandoned all his household chores, took his pickaxe and shovel, and went digging. The first few days were very hard, but he persevered. One day, he found a small vein of gold. There wasn't much gold, but enough to change his life if he knew when to stop. His companion advised him to stop, bring the gold back, and take care of his family first. But when he saw the gold, greed took over. He thought that if there was a small vein, there must be a larger one underneath. He didn't want to stop with just a little. He dug deeper. Day after day, the hole grew deeper, the earthen walls weaker. But every time he saw a glimmer of gold, he became even more determined to dig further. His companions left one by one. They were afraid. They felt danger, but he smiled faintly, thinking they were cowards. In his eyes at that moment, there was only gold. There were no mountains, no sky, no way back. One night, heavy rains soaked the ground. The sides of the pit collapsed. The gold miner was buried in the very pit he had dug. The gold he had gathered lay somewhere underground, unknown to anyone. All that was known was that he never returned. The ancients told that story, not to talk about gold, but about greed. The pit lies not only beneath one's feet, but also within one's heart. When greed becomes deeply ingrained, people no longer see danger, no longer listen to advice, and no longer remember their original purpose. From seeking a livelihood, they transform into those who gamble with their lives. In real life, the pit of greed may not be rocks and stones, but money, power, lust, and fame. Some people are greedy for immediate gain and lose their reputation for life. Some are greedy for power and bring insecurity to their families. Some are greedy for pleasure and ruin their health. Initially, they all think they have control, but greed never likes being controlled. The ancients said that blessings come slowly but disappear quickly when faced with greed. Those who live honestly, accumulating blessings little by little, may not become rich quickly, but their blessings are lasting. Greedy people, on the other hand, may earn quickly, but their blessings are fragile. A single setback can bring them down, because what comes too quickly often lacks a solid foundation. Knowing how to reject greed is not about living without ambition. It's about living within limits. A wise person isn't someone who doesn't want more, but rather someone who knows what they need more for and how much is enough. They don't let greed lead their lives down a dangerous path. The ancients taught that knowing when you have enough is true wealth. But not everyone understands what enough means. Enough doesn't mean not working extra, but rather not sacrificing more important things for more. Not trading your health for money. Not trading your family for fame. Not trading your conscience for profit. Those who know how to refuse greed often seem slower than others. They don't rush forward when they see others making money quickly. They don't get impatient when they see others showing off their wealth. But inside, they possess a rare steadfastness. They sleep soundly. They eat peacefully. They don't fear loss because they don't take more than they deserve. The ancients also said that greed blinds the eyes, but it can illuminate the mind. When the mind is clear, people see the long road ahead, not blinded by short-term gains. They understand that life is not an endless digging, but a journey to avoid falling into a pit of their own making. Refusing greed is the way to preserve lasting blessings. These blessings are not noisy or ostentatious, but enduring. Enduring in health, enduring in family, enduring in peace when closing one's eyes. Those who preserve these blessings, though not the richest, are not the poorest either, because they do not lack the most important thing, inner peace. If you ever find yourself presented with an opportunity that seems too quick, too easy, too tempting, remember the deep pit in that old story. Not everything that glitters is gold, and not all gold is worth sacrificing your entire life for. The ancients did not advise people to escape from life, but rather to live mindfully. Mindful to know when to stop. Mindful to know when to let go. Mindful to preserve blessings for oneself and for those who accompany one on the rest of life's journey. 14. Ancient people viewed life not through major events, but through very small habits. They understood that destiny is not formed by a single impulsive decision, but is gradually forged from repeated choices made each day. Those who control their habits are silently controlling the direction of their entire lives. Many people wait for a big opportunity to change their lives, but overlook the small habits that are holding them back little by little. Waking up a little later each day, procrastinating one more time each day, giving up one more time in the face of negative emotions each day. These things may seem insignificant at first glance, but when accumulated over time, they will create a very different path. The ancients said that habit is an invisible thread. Initially soft, it hardens and eventually becomes unbreakable. Once a habit becomes ingrained, people no longer need to think to make choices. They simply move forward automatically. And it is this automaticity that determines many things we consider fate. There's an old story about two roads that started from the same field. The two paths initially looked exactly alike. Both were small, grassy trails with soft soil. A farmer walked across the field every day on his way to the market. He stood between the two paths, thought for a moment, and then chose the left path because it felt slightly more comfortable for him. The next day, he took that path again. The third day too. Simply because he was used to it. Another person also went to the market every day, but chose the path on the right. Initially, the two paths were no different. But over the years, the path on the left was used more often, so the soil compacted, the grass died, and the path became clearer. The path on the right was used less frequently. The grass grew taller, the soil sank, and it became increasingly difficult to walk on. Years later, the villagers said there was only one road to the market. No one remembered that there used to be two. The other road wasn't better, but because someone used it every day. The ancients used that story to illustrate that habits create paths. Each repetition is a deeper ingrained footprint. Once a path is formed, it's easy to walk on it, but also very difficult to turn in another direction. And at that point, many people think they have no choice, when in reality, the choice had already been made long ago. Habits not only shape actions, but also character. Those accustomed to anger will see anger as a natural reaction. Those accustomed to procrastination will see neglect as normal. Those accustomed to comparison will see insecurity as the default state. But everything that becomes a default has its roots in habit. Ancient wisdom teaches that changing one's destiny doesn't require seeking a master, but simply changing one's habits. To have a more peaceful life, cultivate peaceful habits. To have a clearer mind, cultivate the habit of self-reflection. To have lasting blessings, cultivate habits that don't harm those blessings. Wise people don't try to change everything at once. They choose a small habit and make it a reality. For example, waking up a little earlier so the mind isn't rushed. Eating a little slower so the body isn't tired. Talking a little less so the mind isn't distracted. These small changes, if maintained over time, will lead to many big changes. Some people say they lack discipline, but the ancients believed that it was simply a matter of not yet finding the right habit. Discipline is not about coercion, but about creating conditions that make it easier for good things to repeat themselves than bad ones. When good habits become a path, walking on it requires no effort. People who can't control their habits often live feeling swept away. They want to change, but they keep doing the same old things every day. They blame themselves for being weak, while the problem lies in the fact that they're on a path they've been on for too long. To change direction, you need patience, taking one step at a time. The ancients said that life is not frightening because of one mistake, but because of making mistakes every day without realizing it. Bad habits are repeated mistakes. Good habits are good things that are cultivated. No habit is neutral. It will either pull us up or pull us down. Controlling your habits is controlling your destiny, because destiny doesn't come from anywhere far away. It lies in how we live today. What we choose today, where we go tomorrow, who we become next year, all begin with very small things. The ancients advised us to reflect on the path we are walking each day. Does it lead us to where we want to go? If not, don't blame fate. Start by deviating slightly, even if it's difficult at first. Because with enough time, a new path will form. Small habits create great lives. Not overnight, but in the quiet passage of each day. Those who understand this don't rush or become discouraged. They simply persevere in living according to their beliefs, so that one day, looking back, they will see their lives have taken a different, more peaceful, stable, and brighter direction. 15. Ancient wisdom teaches that there are two types of people in the world who are always weary. One is the one who wants to control everything. The other is the one who lets everything control them. Wise people don't fall into either category. They only do one thing, which is very difficult but very worthwhile: control themselves. Once they control themselves, they no longer feel the need to control others, and they are not easily swayed by others. Much of life's suffering stems from the desire for others to live according to one's own wishes. Wanting loved ones to understand you instantly. Wanting others to behave exactly as you expect. Wanting the world to operate according to what you consider reasonable. But the ancients said that trying to control others is an illusion, because each person has their own mind, their own karma, their own path. You can't force them, and you can't control them either. The more someone tries to control the outside world, the more chaotic their inner self becomes. They easily get angry when things don't go their way. They easily become disappointed when others don't listen. They easily become exhausted from constantly having to observe, adjust, and intervene. Meanwhile, those who know how to turn inward and control themselves live a much more peaceful life. The ancients told a story about an old buffalo herder to illustrate this principle. Once upon a time, there was an old man who raised a large herd of buffaloes. Every day, he would take them to the fields. At first, the buffaloes were very difficult to control. Some would run wild, others would eat and destroy other people's rice crops. The old man would shout, use a whip, and chase after each one to keep them under control. Each day passed, and he became exhausted, but the buffaloes still wouldn't listen. One day, a passerby asked why he didn't tie the buffalo's nose. The old man shook his head. If I tie it, they can't eat, he said. The other man smiled and said, then you should learn to walk first. Choose the path with good grass and clean water, and the buffalo will follow on its own. From that day on, the old man changed his approach. He no longer shouted. He walked slowly and steadily, choosing places with tender grass and cool water. Strangely, the herd of buffalo gradually followed closely behind him. Any buffalo that strayed or found it lacking grass would turn back on its own. He no longer needed to chase after each one. The whole herd continued on the right path. The ancients used that story to say that control doesn't come from coercion, but from inner strength. When the leader's mind is at peace and their steps are steady, everything around them will naturally adjust. But if the mind is still disturbed, then no matter how much you restrain or threaten them, everything will remain chaotic. People who lack self-control often want to control others to compensate for their inner insecurity. They fear losing control. They fear being abandoned. They fear things getting out of their grasp. But the more they control, the further they push others away. Relationships become strained. Family becomes a source of pressure, and they themselves find no peace. Wise people are different. They focus on keeping their minds calm. When angry, they know when to stop. When sad, they know how to reflect. When offended, they don't react immediately. They understand that reflexes are the quickest way to lose freedom. Whoever controls their reflexes holds their destiny in their own hands. The ancients said that a peaceful mind leads to a peaceful life. This isn't because life becomes less turbulent, but because those with a peaceful mind aren't swept away by the waves. They know how to avoid the waves when they come. They know how to bend down when the wind is strong. They don't need to change others. They just need to adjust how they themselves face the circumstances. When you no longer want to control others, you will feel lighter. Lighter because there is no more disappointment. Lighter because there are no more unreasonable expectations. Lighter because you accept that each person can only save themselves. From there, you can dedicate your energy to caring for your mind and body instead of wasting it on trying to mold others. Ancient sages taught that spiritual practice is not about correcting others, but about correcting oneself. Correcting anger, correcting greed, correcting fear, correcting the desire to win or lose. When these things are subdued, a person naturally becomes calm, and that calmness is the greatest strength. Those who are self-controlled don't need to win against anyone. They don't need to prove anything. They don't need to impose their will. They simply live authentically. And it is this very authenticity that creates a quiet power, causing others to adjust their behavior when they are around them. The story of the old buffalo herder doesn't teach how to manage buffalo, but how to manage the mind. When the mind is steady, everything around will be less chaotic. When the mind is still restless, even if you bind the whole world, your heart will still not be at peace. Self-control is the greatest freedom. Not being carried away by emotions. Not being manipulated by others. Not being swayed by circumstances. Those who reach that level don't need to control anyone, because they have found their strongest support within themselves. That is when a person is truly at peace. And when a person is at peace, it's difficult for them to remain restless for long. The ancients once said that life is full of battles, but the hardest battle is not out there, but within oneself. Winning against countless others in the world may bring fame, but conquering oneself brings freedom. Because as long as a person is still dragged along by emotions, desires, and deference, no matter where they stand, they will always be bound. Many people live their entire lives in weariness, not because they are weak, but because they don't dare to say no. They deny their own needs to please others. They deny peace to maintain a good image. They deny their inner voice simply for fear of judgment. Over time, they become accustomed to self-sacrifice and call it a responsibility, while inside they are completely exhausted. The ancients clearly saw this, which is why they emphasized that timely refusal is the beginning of freedom. When you dare to say no to something that harms you, you are saying yes to yourself. When you are no longer forced to bear burdens that are not your responsibility, your mind will be lighter. And when the mind is light, a person has the space to live authentically. Self-control isn't about forcing yourself to be austere or rigid. It's about the ability to recognize when to stop, when to let go, when to be silent, and when to withdraw. Those who control themselves aren't led astray by anger. They aren't swayed by desires. They aren't swayed by praise or criticism. They don't need to control others because they are strong enough to remain unaffected. The ancients said that a peaceful mind leads to a peaceful life, not because life will be free from turmoil, but because those with a peaceful mind are no longer swept away by the waves. They know how to maintain boundaries. They know how to protect their energy. They know what is worth doing and what should be ignored. As a result, their lives are not chaotic, but enduring. They are not ostentatious, but profound. When you learn to say no without feeling guilty, that's a sign of maturity. When you no longer need to over-explain your choices, that's a sign you understand yourself. And when you prioritize peace of mind over pleasing everyone, that's when you're on the right track. The ancients did not teach people to escape from life, but rather how to stand firm in life. To stand firm through clarity of mind, through self-discipline, through the courage to say no to what is no longer suitable. That is the foundation of lasting happiness. If today you realize that saying no doesn't make you worse, but makes you lighter, leave behind the word peace to remind yourself that living lightly isn't about living less, but about living right. And when you live right, your heart will naturally find peace.